Snow bit into his skin like knives. His breath came in ragged clouds, each one weaker than the last. When he collapsed face first into the white silence, he thought it was the end. But then, footsteps, voices in a language he didn't know. Why would 5 Apache women be here, and why were they looking at him like they'd seen a ghost? And would they save him or leave him? One of the women crouched beside him, her eyes scanning his face like she was searching for something she couldn't name. Her breath came out in slow, measured clouds. She said a word, short, sharp, and the others fanned out in a loose half-circle, boots whispering against the snow. Daniel tried to speak, but his lips barely moved. The tall one glanced at his leg, then at his eyes, and for a heartbeat her expression changed. Surprise, maybe recognition, but it was gone before he could be sure. 2 of them knelt at his sides. One slid her arm under his shoulders, the other gripped his coat at the waist. He felt himself lifted, the motion sending pain lancing up his ankle. His breath tore out in a hoarse cry. They didn't stop. The wind bit at his exposed skin as they carried him. No words in English, just the steady rhythm of their steps and the faint jingle of metal ornaments on their clothing. Snowflakes caught in their hair, melting against the heat of his cheek where it brushed the tall woman's shoulder. A shape emerged from the white, a low shelter of logs, half buried in drifts. Smoke curled from a gap in the roof. One of the women ducked inside first, pushing aside a thick hide that served as a door. Heat hit him like a wave. The air was thick with wood smoke and something herbal, sharp but clean. They lowered him onto a pile of blankets beside a small fire. Shadows danced over the walls, revealing a space sparse but careful. Bows stacked in the corner, a pot hanging over the flames, bundles of dried plants suspended from the beams. The tall woman crouched again, pulling a knife from her belt, not toward him, but to cut away the ice-crusted laces of his boot. Her hands were quick, efficient, not cruel. Still, Daniel's heart pounded. Another woman murmured something, and they exchanged a glance he couldn't read, then English, from somewhere near the fire. If he can walk by morning, we decide. Daniel swallowed hard. Decide what? His ankle throbbed in time with his pulse, and the warmth that should have been his salvation now felt like the first step into something he didn't understand. The fire popped, sending a thin spiral of sparks toward the low ceiling. Daniel forced himself upright, elbows shaking under his own weight. Every movement sent a sharp stab through his ankle, but lying there made him feel more like prey than patient. The tall woman noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in threat, more as if she were measuring him. "Stay," she said, the single English word clipped, deliberate. He froze. The others continued speaking in Apache, their tones shifting between quick exchanges and longer pauses. Occasionally, one would glance at him, not hostile but not warm either. A pot simmered over the fire. One of them ladled a thick broth into a carved wooden bowl and placed it beside him. Steam curled up, carrying the scent of venison and wild herbs. Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for it. The first sip burned his mouth, but he didn't care. Warmth spread down his throat, anchoring him back to life. He managed a hoarse, "Thank you." No one answered. One of the younger women, he guessed no older than 20, sat near the door, weaving strips of rawhide. Her gaze flicked to him and then away. Daniel caught the tiniest quirk at the corner of her mouth, like she found something about him amusing. The tall one, clearly the leader, rose to fetch a bundle of dried leaves from the rafters. She crushed them in her hands, releasing a pungent scent, then bound them with a strip of cloth around his swollen ankle. The pressure made him wince. "You fell," she said simply. Daniel nodded. "Horse slipped, lost everything." She didn't respond, only tied the knot tighter. Then she sat back on her heels, studying him with that same unreadable expression. Outside, the wind had calmed, but the muffled quiet was broken by a sudden sound, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. Instantly, all 5 women stilled. The leader made a quick motion with her hand. One moved to the fire, another to the door. The younger one by the hide flap froze mid-weave, eyes fixed on the entrance. Daniel's pulse quickened. He could hear it now too, Heavy steps crunching in the snow, slow and deliberate, coming closer. The hide door lifted. A blast of cold rushed in with a man's voice, deep and gruff, speaking in Apache. The women answered sharply, their tones laced with challenge. Daniel caught none of the meaning, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. The man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and a scar running from temple to jaw. His gaze landed on Daniel, and in that moment, the fire seemed to lose its heat. He spoke again, this time in halting English. "You are not from here." Daniel's throat was dry. "No." The man's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you in their shelter?" Before Daniel could answer, the leader spoke sharply, and the man's gaze shifted to her. They exchanged a fast volley of words in Apache, her voice low but edged with steel. His hand twitched near the knife at his belt. The younger woman by the door rose, positioning herself subtly between Daniel and the newcomer. Daniel's fingers curled into the blanket. Whatever this was, it wasn't a friendly visit. Finally, the man snorted, muttered something, and stepped back toward the door. He gave Daniel one last look, long enough to make it clear this wasn't over, then ducked outside into the snow. The leader lowered the hide flap again and turned to the others. Her expression had hardened. She said something to the youngest, who began to gather items from the shelves, bundles of herbs, strips of smoked meat, a small pouch. Then she looked at Daniel. "You will not stay long." The words landed heavier than the snow outside. Daniel felt the fire's warmth dim again, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "Why?" "I didn't—" The leader cut him off with a raised hand. "Rest. Tomorrow. You walk." His heart sank. His ankle throbbed with every beat, and the thought of walking through the snow on it was almost laughable. But her tone told him there would be no arguing. The women returned to their tasks, the room settling back into its rhythm. But Daniel could feel it. Whatever danger lay outside, it was close enough that even his rescuers didn't want him here when it arrived. And somewhere out there, in the white silence, a man with a scar had decided Daniel Carr was worth keeping an eye on. Night fell hard in the mountains. The small cabin glowed like a lantern in a sea of darkness, the firelight casting long, restless shadows over the log walls. Daniel lay back on the blankets, pretending to rest, though his eyes stayed half open. The women spoke little now. Their earlier exchanges had grown shorter, more guarded. Every so often, one of them would glance toward the door, listening for sounds only they seemed to hear. Daniel's thoughts returned to the man with the scar. His presence had shaken something in the cabin's atmosphere, like a cold draft you couldn't block. Whoever he was, he had authority here, enough to make even the leader choose her words carefully. He shifted, and the youngest woman, still weaving rawhide, looked up. "You understand some Apache?" she asked suddenly, her English accented but clear. Daniel shook his head. "No, I wish I did." She studied him, then bent closer, lowering her voice. "Better that you don't." Before he could ask what she meant, the leader returned from outside, brushing snow from her shoulders. She carried a bow in one hand, a small bundle in the other. The smell of fresh blood drifted in behind her. She knelt near the fire, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a pair of snow grouse. With swift, practiced motions, she cleaned them while another woman added kindling to the flames. Daniel's stomach growled at the scent of roasting meat. He tried to sit up further, ignoring the stab in his ankle. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked. The leader glanced at him, then back to her work. "We see if you can walk. If you can, you go. And if I can't," her eyes lifted to his, unreadable, "then we decide again." The younger woman shot him a quick look, almost like a warning. They ate in near silence. The grouse was rich, smoky, and hot enough to thaw the ache in his bones. Still, every bite tasted like borrowed time. When the meal was done, the women spread out sleeping furs. One lay near the door, another by the fire, the rest against the far wall. The leader remained seated, sharpening a long knife with slow, steady strokes. Daniel closed his eyes, though sleep didn't come. The rhythmic scrape of stone on steel was like a clock ticking down. Then, footsteps, faint but close. The leader froze mid-stroke. In an instant, the woman by the door was on her feet, bow in hand. Another reached for a spear propped in the corner. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He turned toward the hide flap, just as a shadow passed across it. A voice called from outside, low, urgent, in Apache. The leader answered sharply. The reply came faster, louder. Then a second voice joined in, deeper and rougher. Daniel recognized it, the man with the scar. The leader's jaw tightened. She motioned for two of the women to step outside, then turned to Daniel. "Stay down. Do not speak." He opened his mouth to ask why, but she was already gone, ducking into the snow night. The cold rushed in as the hide flap fell back into place. Daniel strained to hear through the thick walls, catching only fragments, angry tones, the thud of boots shifting in snow, the leader's voice low but firm. A sudden crash split the air, wood striking wood, followed by a man's curse in English. "You think you can keep him from us?" Daniel's blood ran cold. Him. There was no mistaking who they meant. The voices rose again, sharper, overlapping, then silence. The flap lifted, and the leader stepped back inside. Her face was calm, but her hands clenched tight around the bow. "They will come back," she said simply. Daniel swallowed. "Who are they?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the younger woman and spoke rapidly in Apache. The girl began packing supplies into a leather satchel, dried meat, water skin, strips of cloth. Daniel pushed himself upright. "You're sending me out now." The leader's gaze met his. "Not tonight, but soon, before they do." Her tone left no room for argument, yet her eyes held something more, concern, maybe even pity. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the walls. And Daniel knew with a sinking certainty that whatever threat those men carried, it wasn't going to wait long to find him. The night stretched on, every creak of the cabin making Daniel's muscles tighten. Sleep came in fragments, moments when exhaustion dragged him under, only for a sound or a flicker of movement to pull him back. Once, he woke to find the leader crouched near the fire, bow across her knees, eyes fixed on the door. She didn't look at him, but her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Keep your strength. You'll need it." He wanted to ask why, but something in her tone warned him not to. By dawn, the wind had eased. Pale light seeped through the gaps in the logs, turning the frost on the walls into silver veins. The women moved with quiet efficiency, packing food, checking weapons, tightening the bindings on their boots. Daniel sat up, his ankle throbbing in protest. "You're leaving?" The younger woman paused mid-step. "We are moving, not far." The leader approached, tossing a folded hide into his lap. "Wrap this around your shoulders. You walk today." He opened his mouth to protest, but she was already turning away. They left the cabin in single file, the leader at the front, Daniel in the middle, two women behind him. The cold slapped his face like a warning. The snow was knee-deep in places, forcing him to lean heavily on a sturdy branch one of them had cut for him. The forest was silent except for their steps. Every so often, the leader would stop, listening. Once, she raised her hand and they all dropped low. Daniel's breath fogged the air as he waited, hearing nothing. Then, faintly, a branch snapping far off. The leader's eyes narrowed. She motioned them forward at a quicker pace. Hours passed in a rhythm of pain and determination. Daniel's ankle burned, but the women set a pace that allowed no time for weakness. His questions, "Where are we going? Who were those men?" died in his throat each time he saw their expressions. By midday, they reached a narrow ravine. The leader gestured for them to follow the stream bed. The snow here was less deep, but the steep walls on either side made Daniel uneasy. A sound echoed down the ravine, a sharp, distant shout. The leader froze, eyes snapping to the women behind. They spoke in quick bursts of Apache, the urgency unmistakable. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. Two figures appeared at the far end of the ravine, moving fast. One was the man with the scar. The other carried a rifle. The leader barked a command. The women fanned out, two taking positions behind boulders, bows drawn. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. "They're after me." The leader's gaze cut to him. "Yes, now move." She shoved him toward a narrow break in the ravine wall, barely wide enough to squeeze through. He fought his way up the slope, the branch slipping in the snow. Behind him, the sharp twang of bowstring split the air. A shout rang out, followed by the crack of a rifle. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Daniel stumbled, catching himself on a frozen root. He risked a glance back. One of the women was still in the open, loosing arrows with calm precision. The leader pulled her back, just as a bullet kicked up snow at her feet. "Go," the leader barked. Daniel clawed his way up the last few feet, collapsing onto the ridge above. The women followed seconds later, faces taut, breaths ragged. The leader scanned the slope below, then turned to him. "We can't go back. They know you're sent now." Daniel swallowed hard. "Who are they?" Her eyes didn't waver. "Men who believe you belong to them." He stared, confused. "I don't—" "Not here," she cut in. "We keep moving." They set off again, leaving the ravine behind. The forest ahead was darker now, the trees thick and close, their branches heavy with snow. Daniel could no longer tell which way they were going, only that each step seemed to take them deeper into a place where the outside world couldn't follow, or maybe wouldn't dare. But as the shadows lengthened and the cold pressed closer, Daniel knew the men behind them wouldn't stop. And when they caught up, he had the sinking feeling that the women's protection would come at a price he didn't yet understand. The forest swallowed them whole. Snow muffled every step, branches heavy with ice bowing low over the narrow trail. Daniel's breath came in white bursts, each one sharper as his ankle protested. Still, the women pushed forward with relentless purpose, eyes scanning the shadows like hunters on the trail of something unseen. The leader raised her hand. Everyone froze. Daniel followed her gaze to a line of fresh tracks cutting across their path, boot prints, deep and deliberate. Not theirs. She motioned for the group to split. Two women slipped into the trees to circle ahead, bows ready. The youngest stayed beside Daniel, her hand never far from the knife at her hip. They moved slower now, weaving through pines that creaked under their snowy weight. Every sound seemed amplified. The groan of wood, the distant caw of a raven, the faint crunch of snow somewhere behind them. Then, a voice. Male, close, speaking in Apache, the tone mocking. The leader didn't answer. She crouched low, signaling for silence. The voice came again, this time joined by a laugh. Footsteps crunched closer, careless, as if whoever it was knew exactly where they were. Daniel's heart pounded. He leaned toward the youngest. "Is it him?" She gave the smallest nod. The leader moved first, gliding toward the sound, bow in hand. The others mirrored her, fanning out until Daniel was left alone in a pocket of stillness. His fingers tightened on the walking branch, the urge to follow at war with the instinct to hide. A shadow flickered between the trees. Then the man with the scar stepped into view, rifle slung across his chest, a half-smile on his lips. His eyes found Daniel instantly. "You've caused a lot of trouble," he said in rough English. Daniel's grip on the branch tightened. "I didn't ask for any of this." The man's smile deepened. "Doesn't matter. You're coming with me." Before Daniel could react, an arrow hissed past his shoulder and struck the snow at the man's feet. The leader emerged from the trees, bow drawn for another shot. The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Still playing protector," he called to her. "You can't keep him." Another voice, this one from behind Daniel. He spun to see a second man stepping out of the shadows, knife glinting in his hand. The youngest woman was faster. She darted forward, slashing at his forearm, forcing him back with a hiss of pain. Chaos erupted. The man with the scar swung his rifle up, but an arrow slammed into the stock, knocking it aside. Daniel stumbled backward, his ankle screaming, as the leader closed the distance, loosing another shot that forced the scarred man behind a tree. The second man lunged again, catching the youngest by the arm. Daniel didn't think. He swung the branch with all his weight. It cracked against the man's shoulder, sending him sprawling into the snow. The leader's voice cut through the noise. "Move!" They didn't wait to see if the men would follow. The women regrouped around Daniel, pulling him into a dead run through the drifts. Branches whipped his face, snow filled his boots, but adrenaline drowned the pain. Only when they'd crossed a frozen creek and climbed a steep bank did the leader slow. She scanned the forest behind them, listening. Silence. The youngest handed Daniel back his walking branch, her breath ragged. "You hit him good," she said with the faintest smirk. Daniel managed a grim smile. "Lucky swing." The leader cut in. "Luck won't last. They won't stop until they have you." Daniel's chest tightened. "Why? Who are they?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not here. We keep moving. If they catch us again, there won't be time for talk." They pressed on, the trees thinning until the land opened into a broad, snow-covered meadow. The leader set a course across it, the open space making Daniel's skin crawl. Every step felt like an invitation for a bullet. Halfway through, the youngest glanced back. "They're coming." Daniel followed her gaze. Dark shapes had appeared at the tree line, moving fast. The leader's pace quickened, her voice sharp. "Run!" Snow swallowed their footsteps as they sprinted across the open meadow, each breath burning Daniel's lungs. His ankle screamed with every stride, but stopping wasn't an option. The leader ran ahead, scanning the far tree line for cover. Behind them, the shouts of the pursuers grew sharper, closer. An arrow whistled past Daniel's ear. One of the women fired back without breaking stride, her shot disappearing into the whiteness. The youngest grabbed Daniel's arm, half dragging him forward when he stumbled. "Don't look back," she hissed. But he did. Two men had broken from the tree line, rifles raised, their dark coats stark against the snow. The man with the scar was in the lead, his eyes locked on Daniel like a hawk tracking prey. The leader's voice cut through the wind. "To the rocks!" Ahead, jagged formations jutted from the snow, black against white. They dove behind them, the women forming a quick defensive line. Bows notched, eyes scanning. Daniel collapsed against a boulder, chest heaving. The first rifle shot cracked the air, splintering stone inches from his head. The leader fired back, her arrow finding the snow at the shooter's feet. "Keep their heads down," she ordered. Daniel's grip tightened on his walking branch. He wanted to help, but his body felt leaden, his injured ankle refusing to bear more weight. He glanced at the youngest. "What happens if they rush us?" She met his eyes, unflinching. "We make them regret it." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Snow sprayed over Daniel's shoulder. The leader barked a command, and one of the women slipped away along the rock's edge, vanishing into the drifts. The scarred man's voice echoed across the meadow. "You can't hide him forever. He belongs with us." Daniel's gut twisted. "What does that even mean?" he muttered. The leader answered without looking at him. "It means they think you're worth something, more than you know." Before he could press her, a sharp cry rang out from the far side of the rocks. One of the women had loosed an arrow, and a man went down, clutching his leg. The second pursuer grabbed him, dragging him back toward cover. The leader seized the moment. "Move, now!" They broke from the rocks, cutting toward a stand of firs on the meadow's far edge. Daniel's vision blurred from the cold and strain, but the dark green of the trees pulled him onward. They reached the first trunks, just as another shot shattered the silence. Bark exploded from a tree inches from Daniel's head. The leader spun, loosing one last arrow before plunging deeper into the forest. Branches closed in overhead, the sound of pursuit fading. Only when they'd gone far enough that the meadow was a memory did the leader slow. She turned to Daniel, her breath steaming. "They won't follow us here, not yet." Daniel leaned against a tree, gasping. "You keep saying they won't stop. Why? What do they want?" The leader's jaw tightened. "There's something you need to know, but you won't like it." The youngest shot her a look. "We don't have time." The leader shook her head. "We make time. If he doesn't understand, he won't survive the next time they find us." Daniel straightened, the cold biting through his coat. "Then tell me," she stepped closer, eyes locking onto his. "Those men, they're not just hunters. They were sent to bring you in, alive if possible, dead if not." The words hit harder than the wind. "By who?" Her gaze flicked to the youngest, then back to him. "You'll know soon enough. For now, all you need to understand is this. What's chasing you isn't just out here in the snow, it's bigger, and it's coming fast. Somewhere deep in the forest, A sound broke the stillness, a low, distant horn. The women exchanged tense glances. The leader's voice was low but urgent. "They've called for more." The horn's echo faded, swallowed by the forest, but its meaning lingered in the air like the scent of smoke. The leader's eyes swept the trees, calculating. "We can't outrun them all," she said. "We'll have to lose them another way." Daniel's stomach tightened. Another way. She pointed toward a narrow rise ahead, where the snow thinned over a jagged ridge. "Up there. They won't follow if they think the trail ends in rock." The climb began at once. The women moved like shadows, quick and quiet, scanning every gap between the pines. Daniel struggled to keep pace, each step up the icy slope sending pain flaring through his ankle. The youngest stayed beside him, offering her arm when the path turned steep. "Keep going," she murmured. "If you stop, they'll catch up." Halfway up, the leader halted suddenly, raising her hand. Everyone dropped low. Daniel followed her gaze down the slope and froze. Figures moved through the trees below, dark shapes fanning out, rifles glinting when they caught a shaft of pale light. The scarred man was among them, head tilted upward, scanning. Even at this distance, Daniel felt the weight of his stare. The leader motioned for silence, then began edging sideways along the ridge, keeping the rocks between them and the searchers. Daniel's boots slipped on a patch of ice, and he caught himself with his walking branch. The faint crack echoed too loudly. Below, heads snapped upward. A voice barked an order, and the figures quickened their pace. "Move!" the leader hissed. They scrambled along the ridge, the snow giving way to jagged stone. The wind cut sharper here, carrying the faint sound of pursuit. Then another horn blast, closer this time. The youngest glanced back. "They're splitting up." Daniel's chest heaved. "How many?" "Too many." They reached the ridge's crest where the forest dropped away to a frozen river below. The leader crouched, scanning the expanse. "If we cross, we leave no tracks once we hit the ice." She didn't wait for agreement. One by one, the women slid down the slope toward the riverbank. Daniel followed, half sliding, half falling, until his boots crunched on the frozen edge. The leader stepped onto the ice, testing it with her weight. It groaned but held. "Stay close to the bank. Spread out your steps." They moved quickly, their reflections flickering beneath them. The cold here was sharper, the air brittle in his lungs. Daniel risked a glance over his shoulder and froze. Figures had appeared at the top of the ridge, silhouetted against the pale sky. The scarred man stood among them, watching as they crossed. He raised his hand, and 3 men broke away, starting down toward the river. "Faster," the leader urged. Halfway across, a sharp crack split the silence. Daniel looked down, hairline fractures spidered out from under his boot. The youngest grabbed his arm. "Don't stop! Keep moving!" Each step felt like walking on glass. The ice groaned louder, shuddering under their weight. Ahead, the opposite bank rose steeply, crowned with firs. They reached it just as another rifle shot echoed, the bullet skimming the ice near Daniel's feet. The leader shoved him upward, helping him scramble onto solid snow. The women followed, then without a word began covering their tracks with branches, sweeping snow over the marks they'd left. Daniel leaned against a tree, gasping. "That won't stop them for long." The leader met his eyes. "No, but it might buy us enough time to get where we're going." Daniel frowned. "And where's that?" Her expression didn't change. "Somewhere they can't follow." The youngest's gaze flicked toward him, hesitant as if she knew more than she could say. Far behind them, the horn sounded again, closer, more urgent. The sound carried through the pines, a reminder that every step they took was only keeping danger at bay, not ending it. And Daniel knew with cold certainty that when the men caught up, they wouldn't be offering a choice. They didn't stop until the forest thickened into a maze of spruce and cedar. Here the snow lay undisturbed, heavy on the boughs, muffling their passage. The leader finally slowed, raising a hand for the group to gather. Daniel leaned against a trunk, his ankle throbbing. "We've been running for hours. Are you going to tell me now?" The leader studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a fallen log. "Sit." He obeyed, breath clouding in the cold. The youngest settled nearby, her bow across her knees, eyes scanning the shadows. The leader crouched in front of him. The men chasing you, they're not bounty hunters, not in the usual sense. They were sent by someone who claims you've taken something from them. Daniel blinked. I haven't taken anything. Her voice was calm, but her gaze didn't soften. Not physically, maybe, but you've been somewhere you weren't supposed to be. You saw something. Daniel frowned, searching his memory. Snow, the fall, the hunt before that. I was just... The youngest interrupted, her tone sharper than before. Don't say it. Not here. The leader's expression warned him to heed the advice. There are ears in these woods that don't belong to either side. Speak of it in the wrong place, and they'll know. Daniel's frustration bubbled. You keep talking like I'm part of something I don't understand. You found me half dead in the snow, remember? The leader tilted her head. We found you because someone else wanted to. We got there first. That sank in slowly, the weight of it chilling him more than the wind. So what now? Her eyes hardened. Now we get you to safety before they decide bullets are simpler than questions. The youngest rose suddenly, bowstring creaking as she drew. Movement. Every head turned. Between the trees, a flicker of motion, too low for a man, too deliberate for wind. The leader signaled for silence, then moved toward the shadow with the youngest at her side. Daniel stayed with the others, heart pounding. The forest seemed to tighten around him, every branch and trunk a possible hiding place. A moment later, the leader returned, dragging a boy, no older than 15, by the collar. His dark hair was tangled, his clothes worn thin. He spat something in Apache, struggling against her grip. One of the women translated, "He's a scout. They sent him ahead to find us." The leader shoved him to the snow, her voice low but lethal. How far behind are they? The boy's defiance faltered, but he said nothing. The youngest knelt in front of him, speaking softly in Apache. His shoulders slumped, and after a pause, he muttered a reply. She looked up. An hour. Maybe less. The leader stood, decision sharp in her eyes. We move again, faster. She turned to Daniel. You'll have to push through the pain. If you can't... She let the sentence hang. Daniel nodded, jaw tight. I'll make it. They left the boy bound to a tree, the youngest tossing him a strip of dried meat before they moved on. The forest began to change, the ground sloping upward toward a ridge. The wind here carried a different scent, stone, and faintly, smoke. Daniel caught up to the leader. Where are we going? Her answer was curt. Somewhere they won't dare follow unless they want more enemies than they can handle. Before he could ask more, the youngest pointed ahead. Through the trees, Daniel saw it, a narrow pass between two cliffs, the rock faces streaked with ice. They entered single file, the cliffs rising high on either side. The wind funneled through, carrying whispers that might have been voices. Halfway through, the leader stopped. Her hand went to the knife at her belt. We're not alone. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged. Not the men who'd been chasing them, but others. Their hair was braided with feathers, their faces marked with paint. They stood silent, blocking the path. The leader stepped forward, bow lowered but ready. Words passed between her and the one in front, quick and measured. Daniel couldn't understand, but he could read the tension in every line of their bodies. Finally, the leader glanced back at him. They'll let us pass, but only if you agree to something first. Daniel's breath clouded in the narrow pass as the leader's words settled in. Agree to what? He asked, his voice low but edged with tension. The painted warrior at the front stepped closer, his gaze steady. He spoke in Apache, his tone calm but unyielding. The youngest translated without embellishment. You must walk the last part alone. Daniel blinked. Alone? Why? The leader's eyes didn't waver. They need to see you without us. If we bring you through, it means we vouch for you. They don't want that. His gut twisted. And if I don't? The youngest's voice was quiet. Then you go back the way we came, and you know what's waiting there. Daniel's gaze shifted to the painted warriors. None of them had moved, but the air between them was taut. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes above the cliffs. He glanced at the leader. You trust them? Her pause was telling. Enough to know they won't kill you, if you do as they say. A bitter laugh almost escaped him, but the memory of the scarred man's voice killed it. Daniel nodded. Fine. Alone. The leader gave a single, approving nod. She stepped aside, motioning for him to pass. Walk straight. Don't stop. Don't speak unless spoken to. Daniel tightened his grip on his walking branch and moved forward. The warrior's eyes followed him as he passed between them. Their faces gave nothing away, but he felt the weight of their judgment like stones in his pack. The pass narrowed, then opened onto a small plateau. Here, the snow lay untouched, the air unnaturally still. A figure stood at its center, an older man, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threaded through his black hair. His coat was lined with fur, his presence radiating authority. Daniel stopped a few paces away. The man studied him in silence, then spoke in accented English. You are far from where you belong. Daniel's throat was dry. Not by choice. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. And yet, choice is what brought you to the place you should not have seen. Confusion flared again. I don't. The man raised a hand, cutting him off. The truth will wait. For now, you are hunted. Those who chase you know why. You do not. That is your weakness. Daniel's fingers tightened on the branch. So why help me? The older man's gaze was steady. Because if they take you, it will cost more than your life. And it will cost us as well. Before Daniel could press for more, the sound of a horn rolled faintly through the pass. The man's eyes shifted toward the cliffs. They are closer than I thought. He turned, gesturing toward a narrow trail that wound upward along the rock face. Go. My people will hold them here. But this path is not safe. If you falter, no one will come for you. Daniel hesitated, but the urgency in the man's tone left no room for argument. He started toward the trail, the wind cutting sharper at this height. At the base of the climb, he looked back once. The older man and the warriors had formed a silent line, their bows raised, eyes fixed on the pass. Then he was climbing, boots scraping for purchase on the icy rock. The trail twisted and narrowed until the ground below vanished in a dizzying drop. Halfway up, movement caught his eye, shadows shifting against the snow far below. Figures poured into the pass, the first rifle shot cracking against the stone. The warriors answered with a volley of arrows. The clash of gunfire and bowstrings echoed up the cliffs. Daniel forced himself onward, each step a battle against the wind and the fire in his ankle. Near the top, the trail bent sharply, and a dark opening yawned in the rock, a cave, half hidden by drifts. The sound of the fight below faded, replaced by the muffled howl of wind through stone. Daniel stepped inside. The air was warmer here, carrying the scent of smoke and something older, earth and pine resin. Faint light flickered deeper within. And then, from the shadows, a voice spoke, low, steady, and in perfect English. I was wondering when you'd get here. Daniel froze just inside the cave, the voice echoing off the stone walls. The flicker of firelight revealed a figure seated near a small pit of coals. She was a woman, middle-aged, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp as flint. You're colder than you should be, she said, gesturing toward the fire. Sit before your blood turns sluggish. Daniel hesitated, scanning the shadows for anyone else. Seeing none, he limped closer, lowering himself onto a flat stone. The warmth from the coals seeped into his hands, easing the ache in his fingers. The woman watched him without speaking. Finally, she tilted her head. They've been hunting you for 2 days. You've done well to stay alive. Daniel gave a dry laugh. If by done well you mean I fell into the snow and someone else dragged me out, then sure. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. You think this began when they found you in the snow? No, Daniel Carr. It began long before that. The sound of his name made him sit straighter. How do you know who I am? She leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. Because I was there when you saw what you shouldn't have. The ridge above the frozen river, last autumn. Do you remember? Daniel's mind flashed. Hunting trip, a foggy morning, the sound of voices carried on the wind. He'd crept closer, curious. Men unloading crates, their faces unfamiliar, their movements hurried. One had looked up, eyes locking on his, and Daniel had backed away before they could reach him. That was nothing, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The woman shook her head slowly. Those crates were not theirs to move, and what they carried was worth killing for. The weight in her gaze pressed against him. They know you saw. They don't care if you understood it. They only care that you were there. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. So I'm running for my life because I walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. Her voice softened, but her eyes didn't. No, you're running because you might remember more than you think. And if they can't make you talk, they'll make sure you never do. The fire popped, sending sparks toward the cave's ceiling. Daniel swallowed hard. And you? Why help me? She looked toward the cave mouth, where the wind howled. Because what you saw belongs to my people. And because the ones hunting you have taken too much already. Outside, faintly, the horn sounded again. Closer, urgent. The woman's eyes snapped back to his. They've breached the pass. Daniel's chest tightened. Then we should go. She shook her head. Not yet. There's one more thing you need before we move. From a pouch at her side, she drew out a small, leather-wrapped bundle. She unrolled it to reveal a narrow strip of fabric, its surface embroidered with intricate patterns in red and black. This, she said, is the proof they want to destroy. You saw it without knowing what it was. Now you'll carry it until we can put it where it belongs. Daniel reached for it, but she held it back for a heartbeat. If you take this, there's no turning away. They will follow you until it's in their hands, or until you are in the ground. The weight of her words hung in the warm air. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. I'll take it. She placed the bundle in his palm. The fabric felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than thread and dye. A shout echoed faintly through the cave mouth, followed by the crack of a rifle. The woman was on her feet instantly, grabbing a bow from the wall. Time's up, she said. Stay close to me, and whatever happens, don't drop that. The horn sounded again, this time so near it seemed to shake the stone. Daniel tightened his grip on the bundle, the heat of the coals still on his skin, and knew that whatever was coming next would not be another chase. It would be a fight. The first shot shattered the air, its echo bouncing down the narrow trail outside the cave. Chips of stone fell from the wall near the entrance. The woman was already moving, bow in hand, an arrow notched in one fluid motion. Daniel pressed against the wall, heart pounding. The cold wind from outside knifed into the warm space, carrying voices, shouted orders in Apache, but not the same dialect the women used. The woman glanced back at him. Stay low. If they come inside, you run deeper into the tunnel. Don't look back. Daniel's grip tightened on the bundle. And you? Her lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. I've been running longer than you've been alive. Go! She darted to the cave mouth, releasing an arrow into the whiteness beyond. A cry answered her shot. Daniel heard boots crunching snow, the sound growing louder. A shadow lunged into the entrance, broad shoulders, rifle in hand. The woman's second arrow buried itself in his chest before he could fire. He fell hard, the rifle clattering across the stone. Another figure appeared, crouched low, pistol raised. Daniel's eyes locked on the weapon, then on a shape moving behind him. Another man slipping inside along the wall. The woman shifted, loosing an arrow at the pistol wielder, but the second man lunged, knocking her back. The bow clattered from her hands. Daniel didn't think. He stepped forward, swinging his walking branch like a club. It connected with the man's forearm, sending his knife skidding across the stone. The man spun on him, fury in his eyes. Before he could strike, the woman drove a knee into his stomach, then slammed her elbow into his jaw. He crumpled to the floor. Go! She barked again, grabbing her bow. Daniel backed toward the tunnel's deeper shadows. The stone floor angled downward, the light from the fire fading quickly. His boots scraped against loose gravel as he moved, every instinct screaming to keep the entrance in sight. Another rifle shot cracked, this one striking the wall so close it sent shards into his cheek. He stumbled, clutching the bundle tighter. The woman's voice cut through the chaos. Down! Now! He dropped instinctively as an arrow whistled over him, striking a figure that had just breached the mouth of the cave. The man fell backward into the snow outside. Silence followed, brief, fragile. Then the horn sounded again, closer, almost at the entrance itself. The woman's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something like urgency there. "They've brought more. We can't hold here." She grabbed the fallen rifle, slinging it over her shoulder. "Follow me. There's another way out, but it's not easy." They plunged deeper into the tunnel, the air growing colder, the darkness thickening. The walls narrowed, forcing Daniel to turn sideways in places. His injured ankle scraped against stone, sending sharp pain up his leg. Behind them, faint shouts echoed. The pursuers were inside now. The woman's pace quickened. Almost there. A pale glow appeared ahead, growing brighter until the tunnel opened into a sheer cliff face. Below lay a frozen expanse of jagged rocks and snow, and beyond that, the dark line of forest. Daniel stared. "We're not climbing down that." She pointed to a narrow ledge winding along the cliff. "We are, unless you want to greet whoever's behind us." They edged onto the ledge, the wind clawing at their clothes. Daniel kept his gaze fixed on the rock, refusing to look at the drop. The bundle in his coat felt like a weight, pulling him toward the abyss. Halfway along, a shout rose from the tunnel's mouth. The scarred man stepped into view, rifle in hand, his expression triumphant. "End of the line, Car!" he called. The woman didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle she'd taken and fired. The shot slammed into the stone near his head, forcing him back. "Move!" she snapped. They reached the far end of the ledge, where a narrow chute of snow and ice descended into the forest. Without a word, she sat and slid, disappearing into the trees below. Daniel followed, the cold biting at his face, the speed stealing his breath. He hit the bottom hard, rolling into the powder. When he looked up, the woman was already moving, scanning the shadows. "They'll find the chute. We need to vanish before they hit the forest." Daniel nodded, the bundle secure in his grip. The wind carried the faint sound of boots on stone above them. Time was almost gone. They plunged into the forest, moving fast but silent, weaving between trunks blackened by age. The snow here was lighter, muffled by the canopy above, but the cold cut just as deep. Daniel's breath came in quick bursts, each one puffing into the air before vanishing into the shadows. The woman kept glancing back, listening. "They're in the chute," she murmured. "Minutes, maybe less." Daniel tightened his grip on the bundle. "Then where?" She pointed deeper into the woods. "There's an old trapping cabin, not ours, but close enough to shelter us until we decide our next step." They pushed on, the ground sloping downward. Daniel's ankle screamed with each step, but adrenaline numbed the worst of it. Every sound, the creak of ice in the branches, the distant snap of a twig, felt like a warning. A sharp whistle broke the stillness. The woman froze, holding up a hand. Daniel scanned the trees but saw nothing. Then movement, two dark shapes ahead, low to the ground, moving with uncanny speed. Wolves, their fur thick with winter. They stopped 10 paces away, watching. The woman didn't draw her bow. Instead, she raised her hand, palm outward. The wolves' ears flicked, their bodies tense, but they didn't advance. One gave a short, almost questioning bark before turning and loping away into the dark. The second followed. Daniel stared. "They just left? They weren't here for us," she said, moving again. "Not yet." The cabin appeared minutes later, half hidden by snowdrifts and leaning under the weight of years. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. The door hung slightly ajar. The woman entered first, sweeping the room with her rifle. "Clear." Inside, the air was stale, scented faintly of old wood and pine. A broken chair lay in one corner, a narrow bunk in the other. Daniel dropped onto it, wincing as he loosened his boot to ease his ankle. The woman crouched by the window, peering through the frost. "They'll follow the chute straight here unless we throw them off." Daniel's mind raced. "How?" She looked at the bundle in his lap. "They want you because of that, so we make them believe they've got it." Before he could reply, a faint crunching sounded outside. Footsteps in the snow, slow, deliberate. The woman's eyes locked on his. "They're here." She slid to the far side of the door, rifle ready. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He gripped the bundle, unsure if he could really let it go. The first shadow crossed the window, a man, rifle at his shoulder. Another moved toward the door, boots whispering against the snow. The woman nodded once to Daniel, then kicked the door wide. Her shot split the night, striking the snow inches from the nearest man's feet. "Stay back!" she shouted into the darkness. Laughter answered her, a voice Daniel knew too well, the scarred man. "You've run far enough. Hand him over and maybe we forget the trouble you've caused." Her voice was ice. "You're not walking out of here with him." Daniel's breath caught as he heard boots shifting, the crunch of more men circling. The cabin felt smaller, the air heavier. The scarred man's tone sharpened. "Last chance." The woman's hand flicked toward Daniel, a signal. He understood. Slowly, he tucked the real bundle inside his coat, then pulled a strip of cloth from his pocket, wrapping it around a piece of firewood. He stood, limping toward the window. "This is what you want, right?" he called. For a moment, there was silence. Then the scarred man's voice, low and eager. "Toss it out." Daniel did, throwing the decoy into the snow just beyond the porch. The scarred man moved for it instantly, bending to grab it. The moment his fingers touched the cloth, the woman fired, her shot kicking snow into his face. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, the splintering crack of bullets through wood. Daniel dropped to the floor as the woman fired again, forcing the men back into the trees. Silence fell as quickly as it had broken. The woman grabbed his arm. "We move! Now!" They burst from the back of the cabin, plunging into the trees. Behind them, the scarred man's roar echoed through the night, the sound of a hunter who'd just realized the prey still carried what he needed most. They ran until the trees thinned and the moon spilled silver across an open slope. Below, the frozen river cut a dark line through the valley. The woman slowed, scanning the shadows. "This is where it ends," she said, her voice low but certain. Daniel's chest heaved. "Ends? How?" She met his eyes. "With them chasing us forever, or with us making sure they can't." From the ridge behind them came the unmistakable crunch of boots on snow. The scarred man's voice followed, mocking, "You're out of ground, Carr." The woman moved ahead, planting herself between Daniel and the sound of pursuit. She raised her rifle. "Stay behind me." Shapes emerged from the tree line, 4 men, rifles at the ready, the scarred man leading. The moonlight caught the white lines of frost in his beard. His eyes locked on Daniel, hungry and cold. "Hand it over," he said. "You don't even know what it is. Let someone who does take care of it." Daniel's fingers curled tighter around the bundle. "If you want it, you'll have to take it." The scarred man's smile widened. "Gladly." The woman fired first. Her shot caught one of the men in the leg, dropping him into the snow. Gunfire answered instantly, bullets snapping past Daniel's ear. He dove behind a fallen log, heart hammering. The night exploded into chaos, rifle cracks, shouts, the sharp twang of bowstrings from somewhere unseen. The woman moved like water, shifting positions between shots, forcing the men back step by step. Daniel peeked over the log, just in time to see the scarred man break from cover, charging straight toward the woman. She swung her rifle, but he was too fast. He slammed into her, the weapon clattering away. They grappled, boots sliding on the icy slope. The scarred man's hand went for the knife at his belt. Daniel didn't think. He lunged from behind the log, slamming his shoulder into the man's side. All 3 went down in the snow. The bundle tumbled from Daniel's grasp, rolling toward the edge of the slope. The scarred man saw it and twisted free, scrambling after it. Daniel grabbed his coat, yanking him back. The man spun, fist connecting with Daniel's jaw. Pain flashed white in his vision. The woman was up again, knife in hand. She drove it into the snow just in front of the scarred man's boot, forcing him to stop or stumble. "Leave it," she hissed. But he didn't. He lunged, grabbing the bundle. Daniel's body moved before his mind caught up. He tackled the man hard, both of them sliding down the slope toward the river. The world tilted, snow and sky spinning. They hit the ice with a bone-jarring crack, the sound echoing across the valley. The bundle skidded away, stopping near a jagged break in the ice. The scarred man scrambled toward it, Daniel right behind. Daniel's hand closed over the man's wrist just as his fingers brushed the cloth. They struggled, boots slipping on the glassy surface. "You don't even understand what you're carrying," the scarred man roared. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Maybe not, but I know you can't have it." With a final surge, he wrenched the bundle free and shoved the man backward. The ice beneath the scarred man groaned, spiderweb cracks racing outward. The woman's voice cut through the cold air. "Daniel, move!" He dove aside just as the ice gave way, swallowing the scarred man in a rush of black water. His shout was brief, cut off by the river's icy grip. Silence fell, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. The woman reached him, pulling him to his feet. Her gaze dropped to the bundle in his arms. "You kept it." Daniel met her eyes. "I didn't come this far to lose it now." She gave a single nod, then glanced toward the ridge. "We need to leave before the others decide they're willing to die for it too." They crossed the ice carefully, the moonlight guiding them to the opposite bank. Behind them, the cracks in the frozen river closed slowly under the night's cold, erasing the spot where the chase had ended. But Daniel knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Dawn broke pale and cold over the valley, the light filtering through a thin veil of clouds. Daniel and the woman moved in silence, their steps crunching softly on the crusted snow. The forest ahead glowed faintly gold, a fragile warmth against the night they'd just endured. They didn't speak until the trees closed in around them again, the frozen river now a distant memory. The woman finally stopped near a cluster of tall pines, scanning the shadows before lowering her rifle. "We're clear, for now." Daniel eased down onto a fallen log, his ankle throbbing with each heartbeat. The bundle rested in his lap, its weight no lighter despite everything. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. She studied him for a long moment. "Now, you decide whether to carry it to where it belongs or to disappear with it." He frowned. "Disappear." Her gaze was steady. "There's a place deep in the mountains where they'll never find you. You could stay there, live out your days without looking over your shoulder. But if you take this where it's meant to go, you'll be hunted again. Maybe worse." Daniel looked down at the embroidered fabric, the threads catching the light like tiny veins of fire. "Why me?" "Because you're the one who saw, and sometimes a seeing is enough to make you part of the story, and whether you choose it or not." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind stirred the pine branches overhead, sending down a soft drift of snow. Daniel's mind replayed the faces, the scarred man, the warriors in the pass, the boy tied to the tree. Every step since that morning in the snow had been shaped by something he didn't ask for, but couldn't ignore. He thought of the ice breaking beneath the scarred man, of the cold black water swallowing him whole. That could have been him, still might be, if he chose wrong. Finally, he nodded. "I'll finish it. Wherever it's supposed to go, I'll take it there." The woman's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. "Then we move again tonight. They won't expect it. And we'll need every hour of daylight to rest." She knelt, pulling a small leather pouch from her coat. From it, she took a strip of dried meat and a flask, handing both to him. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Daniel chewed slowly, the salt and smoke grounding him in the moment. The forest seemed to breathe with them, each creak of the trees a reminder that they were still alive. As he ate, he caught the woman watching him, her expression unreadable. "What?" he asked. "You're different from when we found you," she said simply. "Not just because you're still breathing. You stopped running last night. You stood your ground." Daniel let out a short laugh. "I didn't feel brave." "Bravery isn't about how you feel," she said. "It's about what you do when you can't run anymore." Her words settled deep, heavier than the bundle in his lap. They stayed in the pines until the sun began to sink again, painting the snow in long streaks of gold and shadow. When the woman rose, Daniel followed without hesitation, the ache in his ankle a constant reminder of how far they'd come. The path ahead was uncertain, and danger still moved somewhere behind them, patient and relentless. But for the first time since he'd woken in the snow, Daniel didn't feel like prey. He felt like someone with a purpose. As they disappeared into the trees, the cold air carried away the last echoes of the chase. The bundle pressed against his chest, warm from his body, a silent promise of what still had to be done. And though he didn't know exactly what awaited them at journey's end, Daniel knew this. Whatever price it demanded, he was ready to pay it. If you've been following Daniel's journey through danger, betrayal, and the cold grip of the mountains, you know some burdens are worth carrying to the very end. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage against impossible odds, and don't miss what comes next.